Hello everyone and welcome. This is our last week of criminology in this first part of the summer semester, and we are covering chapter 7 in Frank Smaladger's book Criminology, the 3rd edition, Pearson Education. Our topic today will be social process and social development theories of crime. We'll be looking at how people interact with their society and how they learn various things through that interaction with society. So let's crank up the slide deck for you so you can follow along. Hopefully everybody's able to do that. Again, you should have your textbook handy, 2nd or 3rd edition, whichever one you're working on. And should have already highlighted some things, looked at some things, be familiar with some of this material going into this. So that's going to help your learning if you've already read through it and looked at it. So when I talk about something, you go, oh yeah, I remember that. And then of course you go back afterwards. But while you're doing it, while I talk about it and try to explain it and make it make sense to everybody, you should also be highlighting your book and looking at what's in the book at the same time. So that's me. Remember, I'm your professor here at Pierce College. In this summer session, some of you are actually going to see next session for criminal court system. So hopefully that'll be very interesting. So what are we talking about? Chapter objectives for this chapter, and I hope that the outside noise here at my house today is not too bad. We have some neighbors getting some trees taken care of. If you're wondering if you can hear it, I don't know if you can hear it, so I'll have to go back and listen to make sure. Anyway, our chapter of objectives, we're going to look at what the interactionist perspective is. We're going to look at the evolution of social process and social development theories. In other words, how did they ultimately develop? We're going to look at social control theories, including containment, control balance, and social bond theories. We're going to describe labeling theories. We're going to explain the policy implications of social process theories. And we're going to go into social development perspective to explain crime and criminality. And we're going to look at the policy implications of social development. And this is going to be broken down into 5 separate videos. There's like 83 slides in this slide deck. There's a lot of material to cover in this particular chapter, jammed in social process. There's a lot of work that has gone on in the field of criminology in this particular aspect. And then another one for this week, which I'm going to do after this, probably later on, not as crucial, but the next chapter is on social conflict theories. So that would be a separate 2 or 3 videos that you could watch at your leisure. But the main one you want to watch is this series of 5 that we're going to have for you today on social process and social development. So social process theories basically suggest that criminal behavior is learned in the interaction with others, and that socialization and learning process occur as a result of group membership and relationships. In other words, as we were talking about in some of the psychological theories, is we learn. We learn behavior from our interaction with other people and the various groups we belong to, whether it's a church, your family, your gang, your school, your baseball team, whatever it is, we learn from those associations. And one of the theories we're going to look at, differential association, suggests that every kind of behavior is learned, and it doesn't necessarily matter. Crime is just another thing that we learn how to do. We learn to do crime just like we learn to eat our dinner and how to properly use a fork and a knife at a dinner table. And doing all the things that we do in life, all of it is learned. Social process theories look at that interaction between the individual and all the other groups and people that they're involved in over the course of their lives. So types of social process theories, we have one called social learning theory, very similar to something we discussed a few weeks ago, social control theory, and labeling theory. We also are going to look at social development theories. Social development is looking at a view of human development, where we're going to look at multiple levels of maturation, including how you might mature psychologically, at the same time biologically, in your family, in your interpersonal relationships, in your culture, in society, and at various ecological levels. So there's a lot of things going on in a human being, human construct, human interaction with society, and you may very well know people that are strapping and big and look very mature, but they still act like a 5-year-old, because different parts. We may mature psychologically, but not biologically, or we might conversely mature biologically, but not psychologically. So social development is looking at all that and how that impacts behavior. So the evolution of social process and social development theories, we'll look at how these theories developed. Social learning theory is a perspective that places primary emphasis on the role of communication and socialization in how we learn, whether it be patterns of criminal behavior and values that support that behavior. Obviously, in criminology, most of your theorists, when they start talking about it, are looking at how we learn crime. But keep in mind that all behavior is learned in much the same way as crime. So again, we learn to do a whole lot of things. Where we're learning to play soccer from our interaction with the members of our soccer team, or baseball or basketball or what have you, for those of you that are sports oriented. Learning how to do our assignments and read and analyze data. We may learn that through the interaction with our professors and our other students and other people that we look for. Various behaviors from interaction with parents, family members, church members, gang members, whatever. And we're constantly learning. Differential association, as I mentioned, is one of these theories, and it's an explanation of crime and deviance that holds that people pursue criminal or deviant behavior to the extent that they identify themselves with real or imaginary people from whose perspective their criminal or deviant behavior seems acceptable. Now, what do you mean real or imaginary people? Well, are those people that you watch on TV and some of your favorite shows, are they real people? No, there are actors that are playing imaginary people. So there's a whole host of research on the influence of things like violent video games, like violent movies, and how it creates or contributes to behavior. The differential association is looking at what is the level of interaction that one has with people or with other things, imaginary people, if you will. Again, we're looking at all human behavior is learned, and crime is just another way. It's not really different from any other form of behavior. Just another thing that we're learning how to do throughout our life. Some critiques of differential association suggest that even people that don't have a lot of, say, negative influences going on in their lives, scientifically they call it definitions favorable to law violation. In other words, what they mean by a definition favorable to law violation is that if you interact with a group that's, say, a robbery crew, and you're hanging out with them, and they're always talking about who they're going to rob, how they're going to rob, when they're going to rob, and what skill set they need, what kind of weapons they might need, what they're going to do if the police show up, all those things, and you're constantly in talking to those people, not necessarily going out on jobs with them, but you're involved with them. There's a suggestion that in the critique that there are some people that might hear all this, but not choose to get involved. So differential association suggests that the more that you have that involvement, you're going to choose to follow that path. But there are people that are exposed to these types of things on a regular basis, whether they're in families where there's other people that are taking a criminal path, whether it's the neighborhood that they're in, as we talked about, in the social structure where they're constantly exposed to this kind of behavior, and yet they don't do it. So that suggests that maybe this differential association isn't totally always going to be right. And on the other hand, how do you explain those people that are exposed to good behavior, who are exposed to people that are always talking about doing the right thing, about helping people and all kinds of good stuff, and yet they choose crime. Differential association doesn't really explain that. That's what those people that don't associate with criminals or recognize deviants may still turn to crime. So differential association is one way of looking at it. They suggest that some people who are constantly exposed to a certain type of behavior will then adopt that behavior. And there's different things that we look at, the intensity of that behavior, the frequency, how often are you hanging out with this group, this robber crew? How intense are your discussion? How much time are you spending with them? All these are influential in what one person might do or decide to do or not to do. Another critique is that there's no way to test it, and it really doesn't explain crime. It's like, how can you test to see whether Johnny Jones became a criminal because of his hanging out with the guys in his neighborhood that also were criminals? Or how do you test that? There's really no way to test it. You can say, well, yeah, he spent a significant amount of time with him, so maybe that's why, but you can't really verify it. And it also doesn't really explain crime. It tries to suggest that people are influenced towards crime by their exposure to others, but it doesn't really explain it. And it also doesn't account for our old friend free choice. Remember, we talked about classical and neoclassical theories, and I know a lot of people that come to the classroom, and some of you in the discussion groups suggest that free choice is very important to you, that regardless of what the influences are, people make choices. And those, depending upon where you grew up, what you've been exposed to, I think to some degree we've all been exposed to negative behaviors, but we make a choice of whether we're going to do that or not. If I got a bunch of friends that are doing things that are negative and I walk away from them, I made that choice. If I decide to hang out with them, I made that choice. So that's another critique of differential association. It doesn't account for those people that may be exposed, but know that they don't want to get involved in that type of behavior. People who experience an excess of definitions favorable to violation of law do not always become criminal. I think this is a repeat slide. I must have hit the wrong button. Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. I went backwards by mistake. So I don't know how I did that too. Anyway, this is the end of the first video. We'll come back and we'll be talking about social control theory. So hope to see you soon.